Are you mad? Robb demanded as he entered the room. Jon, behind him, shut the door quietly and leaned against it. Robb was angry. No, Robb was so past angry that he had no words for it. There is a difference between not trusting Baelish and arresting him, he shouted. Sansa didn't turn to look at him, and he felt his rage flare higher. You want war with the Vale? We're strong, that's true enough. But how many kingdoms do you want us to defeat before we can call ourselves at peace? How much blood, Sansa? How many lives? None, she shouted back suddenly, whirling around. I don't want us to go to war. I'd be thrilled to stay in Winterfell and maintain the North for the rest of our lives, but we can't, you know that. Robb threw his hands up. You say that and then go and arrest the husband of the Lady of the Vale. You say that and then you go and arrest him for treason in the name of House Stark. We haven't declared anything, nothing is clear, everyone's confused, and you've managed to stir a hornet's nest. Your actions don't quite match up with what you want, do they? Peter was the man who killed Jon Arryn, Sansa said coldly. He convinced Lisa to kill Jon with tears of bliss, and then he killed her too. He controls brothels and knows the secrets of 1,000 lords. He is the most dangerous man in the entirety of Westeros. She breathed in slowly and then seemed to relax a little. Give me a week, and I'll have proof of his murder. If you're smart, you can use him as a stepping stone to seceding and declaring independence. Robb inhaled, ready to continue shouting, but then he looked at her, actually looked. For all that Sansa stood tall and proud, her hands were shaking. Her eyes were purpling with bruises as if she'd knuckled away tears, and her cheeks looked raw as if scrubbed violently. He inhaled and then exhaled and let his anger drip away slowly. And what should I tell Mother in the meantime? Sansa appeared to sag a little at the sudden change in tone. She covered for it by sinking into a chair carefully and sitting with a stiff back, but there was a tired resignation that he could still identify. I don't know, she replied half miserably. She won't believe the truth, will she? She loves him, Robb said gently. Sansa tipped her head back. Robb could see, through the shadows, the pale gleam of tears in her eyes. I trusted him too, she said quietly, the weariness in her voice tugging at his heart. I trusted him, and he sold me to murderers and thieves. After I took back Winterfell with Jon, she nodded to Jon, who'd been standing so quietly for the whole conversation. He asked for my hand. I was going to accept, but then I remembered some things, and I looked it up, and I realized that he'd not only killed Aunt Lisa but also Jon Arryn, and then he was trying to kill Sweet Robin, and she deflated suddenly. Robb sagged too, and the tension faded from the room easily enough. What was left was sadness and an old sort of grief. I didn't kill him last time, Sansa said finally. But he's done it in this world as well. In King's Landing, he was the man pushing for Father to be beheaded. And he's going to pay for it. And what should I tell Mother? Robb repeated. Tell her the truth, Sansa told him. It's all that we have anyway. And she knows that I know some things from the past. She paused. No, wait. I'll tell her myself. I owe Mother this, at the least. Robb stepped forward and pressed a hand to her shoulder. She missed you. When the Lannister pretender came, Mother wept for days, sure that you were dead. Don't think we aren't angry, Sansa, that he's playing on Mother's worst fears. I'll tell her, she repeated, a hand over her eyes and face down. Give me some time, Robb. I'm sorry, I didn't expect Littlefinger to come from nowhere. Things have changed. Things changed because you and Father are safe, Robb said evenly. I'm not angry about that. I'm not even too angry that you didn't tell me who and what Littlefinger is, because I know you haven't told me everything, but I do wish we had better planning. We have to be the ones acting, not reacting. Letting him leave would have sent the wrong message, Sansa retorted. He sighed. Aye, but this still rubs me the wrong way. Sansa relaxed slightly. Her eyes flicked from him to Jon, and then back again. After a moment, she lifted her chin and looked at him. It was a shadow of her normal, proud gaze, but it had Sansa's signature strength nonetheless. "I'll speak to Mother," she said. "You go and start interrogating those knights that Peter brought." Robb nodded and turned to leave. "Are you coming, Jon?" "No," Jon said after a beat. "You go on ahead. I think I need to talk to Sansa." The hard look in his eyes told Robb that, for all that the three of them held no secrets, he did not want to be in the room for the following conversation. Robb remembered the desolate look in Jon's eyes when he told him of Sansa's fears. He remembered the way Sansa turned almost unconsciously to face Jon, no matter where or when he entered a room. He remembered, above all, the love that the two of them held, and knew that they needed to talk to mend the fraying edges of their relationship. "I want to see you in the practice yard at dawn tomorrow," Robb told him, and meant, "Everything better be back to normal when I beat you up." By Jon's grimace, Robb thought he understood. Sansa wasn't sure how she got here. Intellectually, she was. She'd kept her griefs and tears from Jon for the months they spent on the road, and when she'd spoken to Robb and not him, that had hurt Jon quite badly. It had been festering for weeks, and she'd been trying to avoid speaking to him about it for just that long, and all that had ended with Robb leaving the room with a last, wary look back at the two of them, and Jon starting to demand explanations in a loud voice. It hadn't helped that Sansa hadn't been very receptive to him. They'd started shouting at each other only a couple of minutes back. It had started with Jon accusing her of being deliberately quiet on important issues. Then, Sansa had retorted with a jape about his inability to obey her orders that Jon hadn't found very funny, and, well, here they were. Here they were, 5 minutes, 100 shouted indictments, and so far from the source of the argument that Sansa did not know how they came here. Maybe it'd been because she called him a bastard, or because Jon told her that she was a spoiled idiot of a noble, or that their name-calling had dragged them away from the issue of Sansa not telling Jon that she had nightmares, and instead taken them to Sansa not telling Jon anything. And so, here they were. "Who was my mother?" Jon barked. "Tell me true, Sansa. Tell me who the woman who managed to seduce our father from his vows to your mother was. Tell me." "I would," Sansa shot back, knowing her face was an unattractive shade of red, and that she was screeching, "But you're not exactly letting me, are you? You were the one who said I don't want to know." "Because it isn't something you can unhear." "That's shameful, is it?" Jon asked coldly. Sansa breathed in sharply and kept calm by the skin of her teeth. "No. But it is painful. When you first told me that you'd come back, you said you could tell me who my mother was." Jon took a small, threatening step forward before he remembered and controlled himself. "It was why I believed you. Now it's been 9 years and Father still hasn't said he'd tell me, and I have a right to know, God damn you. Tell me." "Fine," Sansa snapped and stepped towards him. Jon stilled when she got close enough to touch. He didn't seem to breathe when Sansa pressed close enough to whisper in his ear. She hoped, viciously, that he asphyxiated himself before hearing this. Once, in the Godswood, all those years ago, Sansa had told him that she could tell him his mother's name. It had tipped the disbelief in Jon's eyes over to stark wanting, and then to unsteady hope. Almost a decade later, Jon demanded that she follow up on that promise. But Sansa knew very well what secrets like this could do in the hands of the unscrupulous. If someone wanted to hurt her family, this secret could very easily bring the wrath of 7 kingdoms down on their heads. Sansa would speak of Jon's deepest desire, but she would not do so loudly or lightly. "Your mother's name," she breathed into his ear, "is Lyanna Stark." And in the heartbeat before Jon stopped hearing what she said, she finished, "And your father is Rhaegar Targaryen." Jon shoved her away almost before she finished speaking. It was the first time he'd ever treated her with anything less than utmost decorum, and it made her want to weep as much as she wanted to clench her fists and rage. "John," she said as he strode to the door, yanking it open roughly. He looked back at her. His eyes were furious, and the aching shock pain in them almost made her flinch. "Don't talk to me," he bit out. "Don't look at me, cousin." And with that last word, spat as if it were a curse, John turned and left. "God's above," Robb whispered, stepping out of the dungeons. He'd just finished questioning the fourth in a series of 15. Their stories all said the same thing. They'd been squires for Knights of the Vale. A few months previously, there was a sickness that killed off a large number of the knights, suspiciously killing only those who had opposed Littlefinger's marriage to Lady Arryn. In order to fill the gaps, the squires had been trained and knighted quickly. All that was suspect enough. But then came the news of how Littlefinger had met a girl on the way to Winterfell, a girl with north dark hair and striking blue eyes, and how he had killed her. Not in so many words, of course. But one of the men had seen blood streaking a tree trunk, and another had spoken of how Littlefinger had treated the girl with great familiarity, and a last had said that the guards escorting her had been disbanded the night that the two camps parted. When he sketched a portrait of the girl who had impersonated Sansa and showed it to them, all three confirmed it was her. Robb had been sure it was Lannisters that sent the imposter, but he hadn't been sure why. Now it seemed that Littlefinger had been the one to do it, all to test the waters. If Sansa and Father hadn't returned when they had, they might have trusted Littlefinger. Mother might have left Winterfell and gone to the Vale under his control. He was responsible for everything, Robb managed to say, and only just held back from retching at the thought. He was responsible for everything. Sansa washed her face, dried it, and cleaned it as if it were tear-stained, though she hadn't cried even once in the night following Jon's departure. She had several things to do, and whatever else had happened or changed, she owed it to Robb to act as if nothing had occurred. Sansa breathed deep and left her quarters, heading across the keep to her mother's. There were so many reasons to be nervous about this conversation. In another time, in another world, she wouldn't have been. But in this one, Sansa was nowhere near as close to her mother as she had been, once. She was prim and proper and a perfect lady still, but the desire for children and a husband and a love straight out of the songs didn't cling to her as it once had. Even more, she was a woman grown in mind if not body. Sansa had survived things her mother couldn't dream of even imagining. What comfort could her mother offer her when her dreams were full of white cloaks and red blood and betrayal? Yes, in another life, Sansa had been closest to her mother. She had adored her mother's beautiful hair, her mother's genteel, lovely gowns, her mother's southern dances and gods and beliefs. But when she accepted Jon as her sworn shield, and when she began spending more time plotting with Robb to have a better life, she had lost the innocent, sun-soaked, laughing memories of her mother that had once given her such strength. Lady Catelyn couldn't understand why her daughter had chosen to accept the boy who represented her disgrace. And even if she could understand, she couldn't accept it. In an old life, Sansa had loved her mother. She had been a girl raised by a mother to whom family and duty and honor were of utmost importance. And then Sansa's family had died, and her duty had been to obey and love the man who killed that family, and her honor, in the eyes of the world if not herself, had been stripped alongside the lashes she bore on her back. "I am not the girl you once raised and loved," Sansa thought sadly. "I am not the girl who wanted to be a queen. I am not the girl who saw golden princes and didn't see the corruption underneath. I am sorry for it. But I would not do anything different." She knocked lightly on the closed door in front of her, and hoped her mother would be able to forgive her for what she was going to do. "Mother?" came the soft voice from the doorway. Catelyn turned to see her daughter, framed in dawnlight and beautiful for it. Sansa had grown so much. There were times, especially after she told them of her life in another world, in another time, when Catelyn had wondered whether her daughter had died that night, That terrible night that still gave Catelyn nightmares sometimes. Guiltily, quietly, she had wondered if a stranger was wearing Sansa's skin, left behind to mock all that she had lost. But then there were times like this, where she looked weary and quiet and broken up, and all Catelyn could feel was a fierce, fierce love. In the hallway, illuminated by the brilliant light and dressed in a white gown, Sansa looked less like a real person and more like a goddess reborn, all pale skin and sunrise hair and sharp, ethereal features. Seeing her, Catelyn could almost forget that she was furious. "Sansa," she said, waving her in, "did you need something?" "I wanted to talk to you." She hesitated and then seated herself on the chair. "Is father going to be in soon?" "Do you want him to be?" Sansa shook her head. "I want to talk to you first. Robb told him about Peter yesterday. But I think, well, he was your friend before anything else." "He is my friend," Catelyn said levelly. "I know." Sansa hesitated. "But he is not just that, not any longer. I would not accuse him of crimes committed in another world, in another time. Only those done here, and those are numerous. And I'm supposed to be grateful that you don't accuse him of crimes that live only in your head?" "Like what?" she demanded. "He convinced Aunt Lisa to poison her husband," Sansa said quietly. "Robb said that he's pretty sure that he killed a large number of Vale Knights who didn't like his marriage to Aunt Lisa, and that he killed the Lannister pretender who came to Winterfell. One of those alone would have been enough to convict him. We have all three." Catelyn rose to her feet and started pacing. "Do you have evidence of any of this?" "I have confidence in it," she replied, "and I'll get the evidence. Don't doubt it." "You're asking me to trust you," Catelyn said sharply. "A 15-year-old girl against the strength of my years with Peter? And you don't even have a reason for imprisoning him." "Sansa." Her daughter swallowed hard and then straightened until she was as cold and stiff as a blade. There was no emotion in her eyes, only an emptiness that reminded Catelyn of the ice fields of the Gift, empty and desolate and freezing, and yet hard, unbroken. A fierce sort of beauty, if it didn't kill you first. "I love you. I've always loved you. You and I, Mother, we were the ones who weren't of the North. Once I loved you, dearest of all those here. I wish to become you." Her eyes remained level on Catelyn's, and not a single muscle shifted in her beautiful face. "You raised me to be dutiful, to be honorable, to love my family. I learned that there is no higher duty, no higher honor than caring for that family. I know you trust Peter, but he is a monster and a death dealer, and I will see him dead for it." "Will he have a trial then?" Catelyn asked coldly. "Or will you murder him for unknown sins in the backyard gullies of Wintertown?" Sansa rose to her feet as well. "I will send a raven tonight to Lady Arryn," she said. "I will pretend to be Peter and ask for some clarification on the poison she used. Once we get her confession, we shall call our banners. I will have Littlefinger convicted in front of all the North, and when Robb takes his head, not a single soul shall call it vengeance. And what will happen to Lisa, if she is complicit in this murder?" "On my word as a Stark," Sansa said, soft as a raven's feathers, "she will survive this. I wish to assure you of that," and she breathed in, and all her softness disappeared behind another taller mask of ice. "And I wish to apologize, for you once loved Peter, loved him still, perhaps, and this is going to hurt you. I am sorry for that. But only for that. Nothing more." Catelyn knew she was trembling, knew her rage was potent and freezing, knew that she had never been so angry at one of her children in all her life. "For my love of him, you offer condolences. Not for the dignity he is due as a man, as a lord." Sansa's face suddenly cracked open, all her calm reserve gone in favor of her own fury. "He stood beside Cersei Lannister while she questioned me as to where Jon and Arya had disappeared. He told her that father and I were traitors, and that traitors deserve traitors' deaths. He wanted me and father dead, and you stand there and defend him? What? But he said. He sent a raven, Caitlin heard herself say numbly. After you told Robb that your father had been captured, Peter said he would try to protect you. He did his level best to kill us, Sansa said flatly. She flinched at the words and then retreated to the desk, seating herself, searching for some sort of composure. When she felt she might not weep or scream or curse herself, she looked up at Sansa. You are my eldest daughter, and are as a stranger to me. Who are you? I do not know. I feel like weeping, Sansa, when I see your eyes. They are mine in color and shape, but they are so much colder than mine has ever been. And you were so young now, yes, but when you died in another world as well. Oh, my poor, sweet, darling one. What did they do to you? What happened to you? She asked quietly. What did Peter do to you, Sansa? Not in this world, no. In your other one. What did he do that you hate him so? Sansa shook her head. There are things you don't want to know. Things that will only hurt you. I told you that I came back in time, and if I tell you all how I was hurt, you will not be able to sleep through the night. She smiled, gently, patronizingly. Just know. Caitlin arched an eyebrow and sent her a look that she had perfected for Arya when she was being particularly irritating, or Bran when he was doing terrifying maneuvers, or even Rickon when he would not listen to any of the maesters. You will listen, it said, or you will face consequences. Sansa's mouth snapped shut. Caitlin hid a smile and kept her eyes narrowed on her daughter. I am your mother, she said, and it was not sharp or angry or loud, just imperious. Just demanding. I deserve to know what happened. You faced it, Sansa. I can bear listening to what you endured. It is not a happy story, Sansa said, almost desperately. Mother. Tell me, she said, and it was iron, it was steel, it was a Tully's honor and a Stark's ice and a mother's worry. Sansa bowed her head, red silk strands sliding over her pale face, and she began to speak. Do you know what it does to girls, doing to them what you did to me? You tried to break me. You thought me an ivory chess piece, a fainting doll, a deadened specter. You thought that I would be as easily defeated as those who came before me. But I am a wolf. I know what it is to be a queen uncrowned, and a brotherless sister and a deathful wife. My pack died, and in their lifeblood I was baptized. I am a wolf, and I will tear your throat out before you ever see my claws. Sansa faced the shadow of Littlefinger and thought, You will learn to fear me. He tried to break me to become you, she told her mother. He tried and he failed. I am no ghost. I am a vengeful woman, and he will fear my wrath. It was hours later, or perhaps it only felt so long, but a knock came on the door and Sansa realized her throat was dry. When she looked outside, the sun had risen and it was likely almost noon. Come in, she called. Robb stuck his head in. He wore simple armor, and his red hair was mussed and sweaty. His eyes narrowed on their mother's tear-stained face, and then Sansa's own exhausted mien, and he opened his mouth, likely to ask what had happened. Sansa shook her head once, sharply, almost violently. Don't you dare, you arse. Not now. He frowned but controlled himself. Do you know where Jon is? No, Sansa said. We fought yesterday. He was quite angry when he left. She felt her lips twist gracelessly. If I had to guess a place, though, probably Wintertown. Wintertown? Robb asked. But he never. He paused, taking in her slightly shaking hands and red-scrubbed eyes, and shook his head. What did you tell him that was so irritating? Their mother sighed. I believe I am needed in the kitchens, she said. Sansa, I know that there are things you haven't told me. I don't need, nor want to hear it all. But if you wish to speak to me, I shall always be here. Do you understand? Of course. I should have told you earlier, I think. She'd been afraid that her mother would see what had happened to her as a mark of weakness. Of uncleanliness, perhaps. Sansa could defend herself against such accusations easily, and on an intellectual level, she understood that she was blameless, but had her mother so much as looked at her with the slightest hint of disgust, she knew that a small, secret part of her would have been shattered. But there hadn't been disgust. Horror and anger, yes, twined together, but underneath it all, love. Only love. It had healed things inside Sansa she hadn't known needed healing. I'll come to you if there's anything else, Sansa told her softly. Her mother nodded and left the room quickly. Robb looked between them and then shook the questions off visibly. She turned to face him fully and reached forward, catching one hand in both of hers. If Roderick finds Jon, tell me. He deserves to hear an apology. And don't tease him about this. It's not kind. What he asked, how I answered, we are both in the wrong, and I need to talk to him about this. So, don't interfere? Robb nodded. I can do that easily enough. He smirked. Jon told me about the same thing. Our problems are our own. Don't you worry about it. Sansa offered him a faint smile. I know how much you enjoy going after things with a sword. I also know how much you don't like sitting still. Don't worry, everything will be back to normal soon enough. Between Jon and me, of course, but then you'll be a king soon too. She arched an eyebrow. The southern armies will learn to fear us. His smile grew. Winter is coming, Sansa, haven't you heard? Winter is coming, Sansa agreed, and her grin was full of teeth. But we are the Starks, and we will survive. A few years ago, Theon Greyjoy had started visiting Wintertown. It had been the beginning of a nightly adventure for both Roderick and Jory. Usually, Theon only drank and wallowed in the brothel if he had enough money, but then there were the nights when he tried to start fights or when he insulted some high-flying peasant. Those Roderick dragged him out without any thought to his dignity. And then Robb had followed him. After that, it had been Jon. At some time, Roderick had started to bribe the guard at the gate so he could know when he had to head down to Wintertown and bring the idiotic boys back before they could get gutted by some back alley orphan with large eyes and an empty belly. But for all that, the times he'd had to bring Jon Snow back from Wintertown could be counted on one hand. He'd made mistakes, just the same as Robb, but had always been more reserved. He tended less towards a blind haze that Theon favored and more towards the fine balance between happiness and shakiness that meant it wasn't obvious that he was drunk. Which was why this was startling, to say the least. Robb had sent him to find and bring Jon back to Winterfell. Roderick had laughed then to think that he'd find him trying to drink away his sorrows, but find him he did, sequestered at a corner table, head down on the table and a teetering pile of tankards around him. Glared at anyone coming close, the innkeeper said, shrugging. Didn't start any fights last night, though, so we didn't stop him. Roderick nodded and shouldered his way forward, leaning down and hoisting him up an arm over Roderick's shoulder, the other scrabbling weakly at the wooden grain. On the way back to Winterfell, he only threw up once. For how much he had drunk, Roderick decided he was impressed. For a boy of less than 20 years to hold his ale so well was nothing less than admirable. By the time they'd entered the keep, he had started drooping. Almost his entire weight was leaning on Roderick's shoulders. Roderick sighed and took him to the boys' chambers in the keep. A number of servants brought lemon water and a wool cloth to clean him up. Roderick had just finished getting his jerkin off, which was caked with vomit and dried wine when Lady Sansa entered the room. She swept in haughtily, red hair glittering like a beacon, and all movement in the room halted when they noticed her. She didn't look at Roderick or any of the servants, focused almost entirely on Jon. "Is he all right?" she asked, inflectionless, still not looking up. Aye, Roderick responded. He'll sleep for some time yet, but then he doesn't need any of you. It wasn't a question, but he treated it as one. Aye. Her eyes lifted to meet his. Then, she said, imperious as her lady mother, get out. Roderick gaped at her. Lady Sansa was always a lady, unfailingly polite, sweet-tempered to even the worst-behaved squires, never even touching at impropriety. But this was the height of misconduct. And she leveled a look at him that would have ice. In that moment, she looked twice as scary as her father at his angriest, twice as terrifying as her mother in a temper. All cool, honed contempt. Did you not hear me, Sir Roderick? 'Tis highly improper, he protested. Sansa waved a hand. Tell my mother if it so pleases you. Until then, her face shifted into a mask that made her look like a dire wolf. Get out. Roderick swallowed and left. Jon awoke to a fall of red hair and a pounding head. His groan resounded in the empty room as he shut his eyes again. Sansa, for whom else could have hair that long, that red, bent over him when he did so, close enough that he could feel her breath against his lips. Before he could startle, however, she retreated. He relaxed minutely against the bed. And then she threw water on him. Jon lurched upright, sputtering, just in time to see her set aside the basin. What the fuck? He asked, teeth chattering. You called me an idiotic noble girl, she said evenly. I was angry. You and Robb have been telling me to express my emotions, haven't you? Jon searched for something to wrap around himself. When he couldn't find it, he straightened his spine and glared at her through an aching head. You shouted enough right then and there, didn't you? His teeth clacked together against his will. Vainly, Jon reached for some tattered shreds of dignity. No need to become vindictive. Her lips twitched. You're finding this funny, he accused. A little, yes, she murmured. Oh, so it isn't enough to pity the poor bastard who didn't even know his own parents' names, parents being multiple, you have to throw water on him? Sansa checked herself at that, hands stilling from picking at the frayed edges of his blanket and instead looking straight at him, blue eyes flecked with some emotion he couldn't name. I've never pitied you, she told him, and her tone was not as sharp as he expected. Not in all my life. I didn't love you once, but pity? Oh, you were too proud for that by half. Jon looked at her, stunned. I'm too proud? Yes. Her hands folded neatly together in her lap. Too proud and too idiotic. Suddenly, he was furious. Tell me what I've got to be proud of, Jon bit out. Turns out my father was a rapist son of a man who liked to burn people alive. Turns out I'm a Targaryen. It's madness that runs in my blood, Sansa, not honor. Tell me what I've got to be proud of. Sansa's eyes shuddered. When he paused for breath, she asked coldly, Are you finished? Aye, he grunted. For now. Then hear this, she announced. Hear this, Jon, you are a Stark. When Rhaegar Targaryen lay with Lyanna Stark, the babe was born with gray eyes and black hair and not a hint of silver and purple. 2 houses' blood warred inside of you, and 'twas Stark blood that won. 'Twas Lyanna Stark's blood that ran true, and gave you a face and a nature more Stark than any of Eddard Stark's trueborn children. Jon felt his rage fade. The way Sansa looked at him, all faith, all belief, all sheer, beautiful trust, it sank into his ribs and warmed him as the best ale couldn't have. When Sansa whispered those names into his ear, he had felt like there was a pit in his stomach, yawing and baying for something to fill it, and he tried to fill it with drink and numbness, but it hadn't worked. Clearly it hadn't, for here they were, him in a damp shirt, the faint smell of lemons all around them, and Sansa offering him the first thing that managed to fill the hole. Thank you, he managed. Sansa nodded, once decisively, and rose to leave, he thought. His breath rattled in his lungs and he wanted, abruptly, desperately, for her to remain. A week ago, he might not have thought overmuch of asking it of her. But there had been something in the dim light of the Red Keep, and something more in the cave where he'd stumbled upon her. And then they were in Winterfell, and all Jon could remember was the aching, ballooning hurt when Robb, Vivs had told him that Sansa couldn't sleep, and well, he didn't know if they were able to go back to what they had been before they left Winterfell. More to the point, he didn't know if he even wanted that. And she was at the door, almost opening it. "Why didn't you tell me?" The words burst out of him, like punches. He flinched, waiting for her to start yelling as before, or worse, sneering, but instead she only stilled. When she turned around, there was only sadness in her face. "About the nightmares?" "About everything." Sansa seated herself again, staring intently at her lap. After a long pause, she began. "I killed Elin Payne," she said, almost soundlessly. "I was so frightened I'd killed a man before, yes, but never with my own hands. And if I stopped to think about it or consider, I started shaking. We couldn't afford those first few nights. We had to move so fast, so quietly, so I just tried to stop thinking about it. I was so tired by the time we slept anyway that I didn't even dream." Slowly, as if in a dream, as if his hand belonged to another, Jon reached out and caught her fingers in his. "And then father was ill," she continued. "I was worried about him. I was terrified for Arya. The Lannisters were still on our heels. And I couldn't, Jon, I could hardly think straight, much less consider telling you, because if I sat down and tried to handle everything, I'd break. And we didn't have time for it." Jon shook his head. "We'll always have time for things like that, Sansa. First blood is difficult. It's hard to handle even for trained men. You." "I'm not so much a shrinking violet as Robb thinks," Sansa interrupted. And that was Sansa at her sharpest, at her loveliest, all smooth-edged sapphire, but the edge honed enough to cut if you weren't wary. "I've been responsible for death before. It's never been easy, no, but this isn't my first, I promise you." "But you're still hurting." "Over everything. The Lannisters. Being back in the Red Keep. Being forced to beg for father's life again. Everything. Not just island pain, I assure you." He felt the corners of his lips twitch upwards. "So it was a lack of time at first that you didn't tell me. Then?" "Then I didn't want to handle it," she shrugged. "I couldn't sleep, but there was so much else to think on, and it just didn't happen. I thought I was dealing." "But you weren't," he murmured. Sansa, amazingly, managed to look amused. "I didn't know that until we were in Winterfell, and even here I couldn't sleep. The first person I saw after that was Robb." She sighed and flipped their palms so she could trace a hand over the veins on the back of his palm. It sent a shiver down his spine. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, soft and honest. Jon swallowed. "Thank you. I mean it, you know." Her eyes darted up to meet his, and then back to their joined hands once more. You were not a Targaryen. You're of the North. You always will be. Father always loved you. Father loves you. Robb and Arya and Bran, they've always loved you. They always will, no matter who your father was. Because they know you, and that's what matters." Mayhaps he was still drunk. Mayhaps he was a Targaryen yet, in truth, and all that was needed to make that heritage of his rise to the surface was his knowledge of it. Jon wasn't sure what madness had overtaken him, only that something had. "And you?" he asked, quiet and daring and pointed as he could manage. Sansa stilled. Her hair spilled over her shoulder like a fall of flame. It hid her face from him easily. Jon wanted to take the words back immediately, feeling like a fool and worse. He wanted to go back in time, and so his lips shut with Sansa's thickest needle. But then she shifted and he could see her face once more. Her cheeks were red. Her eyes, blue and beautiful, were averted. But then she looked up at him, and the fire in them could have melted all the frozen fields beyond the wall. Heat bloomed in his gut like ink spreading through water. "Sansa?" he whispered. She was trembling. Her hands twitched on his damp coverlet and began to move upwards, barely brushing his arm and then skimming past his neck, fingers trailing over the thin skin over his pulse point. He could feel the way they shook minutely against it. She cupped his jaw, then, and her eyes hadn't shifted away from his, not once. They were full of something Jon had never before seen in them. It took less than the gentlest press of her hand to make Jon shift forward. Their lips met, and everything seemed to fade into the background. His damp skin, the bitter taste at the back of his throat, the sharp scent of lemons. Sansa tasted of summer apples and something colder, cleaner. Jon arched his neck, freeing his other hand to tangle in her hair and bring her closer. She gasped into his mouth at the new angle, leaning closer and deepening it. And then her knees slipped off the coverlet, and she tumbled straight to the floor. Jon scrambled to get the sheets off him quickly, half panicking. Before he could, though, Sansa had started laughing, head thrown back, a low rolling sound that he hadn't ever heard before. Looking up at him through her lashes, she said, still snorting, "Gods, I thought I was unpracticed." "Don't be mean," Jon replied grumpily. He couldn't help the way his lips twitched, though. "No?" And suddenly, she was standing, and God's Jon knew he might regret it in the morning, but at the moment he knew he'd never been so breathlessly, hopelessly addled as when she looked at him so steadily, so heatedly. "I suppose I have to make it up to you, don't I?" Jon reached out and tried to kick his feet free of the coverlet. The only thing that happened was that he got more hopelessly twisted in them. She smiled at him then, eyes glittering with amusement, so sweetly he was sure he'd combust on the spot. Leaning down, winding arms around his neck and pressing close, she whispered in his ear, "I love you. I'll always love you, Jon. Bastard and Targaryen and all." "Don't ruin it," Jon managed to say. "No?" she asked, and he felt a laugh bubble through his chest as well. His eyes fell on the basin beside him. It was still half full of water, and Sansa was stepping closer, and... oh, damn it all to hell. Jon moved as quickly as he could, under her arm and bracing himself on the table. He took the basin and, in one smooth motion, threw it straight into her face. "What the..." she began. Her hair was plastered to her face, and she never looked so gloriously angry than in that precise moment. "Payback," he said, barely able to speak through his breathless laughter. "I'll show you payback," she snapped, wringing her braid angrily. Jon only laughed harder. "'Twas you that called me a proud idiot," he gasped out. Sansa tried to cloud him and tug on her braid simultaneously. Jon grinned up at her, shamelessly holding onto her hand, and it took scarce a few seconds for his glee to break her stern mask. Soon enough they were both laughing, and Sansa bent over him and shaking. Gods above, Jon thought, awed and deliriously, incredibly happy, reaching forwards and winding his finger through a stray red curl. Gods above, I love her. I love her. My thoughts as a reader. Yes! This is it! This is what we've been waiting for! Gods, you all knew we were building toward it, didn't you? All that circling, all those sidelong glances, the tension strung tighter than a bowstring, and then the kiss. Sweet, awkward, inevitable. That's why we read through all the fear, the grief, the shadows of the Red Keep. Not for the blood, not for the court whispers, but for that moment when two broken children find a scrap of warmth in one another. And of course, nothing in Westeros comes without a cost. A kiss is never just a kiss, it's a promise, a peril, a step onto a path that may damn them both or save them. But for now, it's enough.